Greetings, everyone. I am Monica Rhodes, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce my video series, Three and a Possible. As we know, histories are often multi layered, and the name of this show is certainly no exception. If you are a spades player, then you know this phrase is used when you're trying to predict how many books you have in your hand. Three and a Possible also represents the essence of cultural preservation, which is it's not just a conversation with the past, but one that concerns the future as well. Three and a Possible is predictive. Through this series, I will be chatting with experts in the preservation space and asking three and possibly four questions per interview. This is a free flowing discussion with my community of practice, my friends who are in the preservation ecosystem. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome David Gibney to Three and a Possible. David, how are you today?
No, I'm great, and it's great to be here. Yeah, been looking forward to it.
Excellent, excellent. I know we've been trying to get on the books for a while, but David, I want to jump right into our conversation and just ask you, like, what is the most exciting part of your job, a part of the work that you're now leading at this point in your career?
Yeah, I'd say I've retired from mostly hands-on, and I'm teaching. I'm affiliated with a lot of different organizations. I'm working with the National Park Service, training their employees in HistoriCorps, which I'll be going to Puerto Rico in February, and then the Hope program just got done with working at the Peel Center, with three Morgan State students. I'm also going to be teaching at a place called Eastville Village this coming summer. So I'm doing teaching, which for me is really something important that we're basically passing on that knowledge in the world of preservation. One, we're saving buildings, but what I really try to get through to people, it's a occupation that a young person can take on and really make a good salary and have work for the next 50 years. And I tell them you'll never be replaced by robots or AI. And what other thing could you take up now and go to college or a university and be guaranteed that you have work for the next 50 years? I don't think there's very few, because AI is moving out so fast and robots and things like that. They're just eliminating jobs. But in the preservation world, you have to have that knack, you have to have that eye, and you have to make some really important decisions when you're working on historic structures.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, in addition to your preservation work, you also are an artist. So, can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you've taken up and talk some about the sculpture garden?
Yeah, now this is kind of funny. Yeah, my background, I've always been an artist since I was a kid. My mother was impressed when I drew all the apostles in second or third grade. So I've always had that interest in art, and I've gone to a lot of different schools, but I finally have landed where I like to do collages and assemblage type of things. And 20 years ago, I bought some property and I built two structures on there. I designed and built my own houses. They're very Japanese influenced, Frank Lloyd Wright influenced. And we found out I have like 1 acre, but behind my house, there's a property that goes on for about 100 acres, and it's the watershed. Hagerstown, the city of Hagerstown owns it, and so I'm just going out and installing, I call it land art installations, and that's really where I'm putting a lot of my energy in there right now. And so we have 36 pieces out there of installations. So yeah, as you can see to the right, there's an assemblage right there. The one to the left was actually up in Maine, is where that's located. So my life right now, I'm one more year, I'll have 50 years in preservation. And so I'm going to juggle. I want to still continue teaching. I'm not doing any outside contracting, but the teaching part is, teaching of preservation is extremely important to me, but I'm trying to minimize that down. I really, for the first time in my life, starting in 2025, I want to be able to get up in the morning and go into the studio. I've never had that luxury. It's always been evenings or weekends or things like that. So I'm looking forward to that. So I want to spend the next 30 years doing my artwork. So I'm trying to keep myself healthy, with that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I really enjoy visiting the park and visiting your home. It's absolutely incredible. And David, I didn't know, you're coming up on a 50th anniversary of being in the preservation space. One thing I often say as a part of the work that I do is, preservation is about thinking, 50 years ahead.
Yeah.
What are we planning for? What's that vision? And we'll come back to that question. But before we go there, I am curious about your 50-year journey to this point. And how did you get started in preservation? What are some of the places that you worked? Can you tell us, like, really what pulled you into this space
Yeah.
around preserving historic places?
Right. Okay. So I started out, after high school, I went to Indiana University. I was taking art classes, but I also knew I needed some kind of trade. So I worked for a contractor building new houses. And I did that for about 3.5 years. And then my older my older brother and I, Jeffrey, I'm originally from South Bend, Indiana. So we bought an abandoned house that was on Washington Street, and it was, yeah, for 30 years it was abandoned. So we bought that in 1975. We did not know what we were doing. My parents cried, and the windows were all knocked out of it. It was a total mess. And so we had gotten an inner city loan, and so we had this deadline. We had to get it pretty much fixed up in a year and a half. And then the city had an open house for it. They were trying to revive the inner city neighborhoods. And then from there, I just said, this is pretty cool. I like working on old houses. So I formed a company then, not knowing what I'm doing. It was called the Old Building Recycling Company, and we were
Okay,
going from house to house.
that's a great
And
name.
then I had got information about the National Trust for Historic Preservation, had a program called the Restoration Workshop. So I applied for it, and I was chosen to be one of the apprentices. So I said, it was a 2-year program. So I was there from 1979 to 1980. And it was a place I really learned how to do restoration, the right techniques, the right products, that kind of thing. And so from there, I've always been into it. And what's kind of interesting, my background really was just in woodworking, carpentry, but I decided that I wanted to learn everything. So I sent myself to any workshop I could go to. I went to Philadelphia and studied under David Flaherty for like a week in decorative plastering. And then another place I went to a lot was called Eastville Village outside of Albany. So every summer I took a workshop, took many on masonry, woodworking, flat wall plaster, anything I could take, and then that way, and the customers liked it too. So once we were on a job, they'd say, where can we find a good mason? I said, we can do that. Where can we find a plaster? We can do that. And it's always been an interest of mine to not just focus on one trade. And I won't say I'm a master at all of them, but I do a good job with all of them. And I'm able to teach people the right, where to start with all the different trades. So yeah, and I'm coming up on, to 2025 will be my 50th year just in preservation. So, but I had a company, I moved to Maryland 37 years ago. So I developed a company, it was called Historic Restoration Specialists. And at one point I had 10 employees, and we were doing work in Washington and Baltimore, and then locally around the Antietam battlefield. Actually, I had several projects going there all the time. So it's been great.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's really interesting. I've hosted a number of these conversations, and when people are getting started like that, just that hunger to learn more and to put yourself out
Mhm.
there and to be uncomfortable and to try and fail and keep trying again. And we've talked about the importance. Like, no one comes onto a job site as an expert or just a natural. Now there are people who are good, right? Who are like naturally
Right.
good, but to really hone a craft, like, it takes time. and that
Hmm.
and you've invested in that for decades now, and so I think
Yeah.
is incredible. The
Hmm.
other thing I'll say, David, is we met years ago when I was leading the Hope Crew program for the trust, and I will say, like, whenever I was scratching my head and trying to figure out where could I find someone to help train young people in the preservation trades, you would often be my first call, depending on what part of the country we were in, because you just
Hmm.
have this knowledge base that is so expansive. But I would also say, and I'd like for you to talk about this a bit more, like the importance of being able to teach, because doing is one thing, but being personable enough to encourage people that it's okay to not do well the first few times. Like that's a special skill.
Right.
How did you develop that teaching gene, that teaching streak that you have that you do so well?
Yeah, I would say, because I learned from watching other people. That's how you do it. And then that when I'd go to workshops, I would really concentrate. And so with students, I don't expect them to do it right the first time. And it's practice, 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 especially in the masonry world. There's certain things about that. It's just practicing and don't give up and just, keep at it. So, and I feel like I have patience. I had patience with my employees, and I really have patience with students because I know that they'll get there with that. And so I really encourage them. I'm not one to say, oh, give me that thing. Here's how you do it. I just keep letting them keep going and do it again and doing it again. And you have to be kind, I guess. You
Yeah,
have to be a kind teacher and don't take the trowel out of their hands, let them do it. And I've seen situations, there were times that I thought this person's never going to get this, but it's like by the next day at noon, it's like this person is doing a beautiful job pointing up the brickwork or the stonework. So I love that. I just love that aspect of teaching, going about that. So it takes patience and being able to really be direct when you're giving instructions, real precise, direct, and say, okay, give it a shot.
yeah, yeah. And again, I'll say it is a skill to teach. I don't often talk about this, but there were certainly projects where I had to go with different contractors, preservation leads, because while talented and able to do beautiful work, they were just not able to work with people. And if you're not
Yeah.
able to do that, then on a education, learning, training program, there it just doesn't really work out. So I again, thank you so much for your leadership around projects down in Tuskegee and Morgan State University, Eastern State Penitentiary, the Peel Center in Baltimore. Where else have we worked, David? I'm trying to sit here and think of.
Well, with the Hope program,
Yeah.
luckily I got to go to St. Croix,
Oh yeah.
so I was working with the Hope program. It was called the Little Princess Estate. So that worked out well for me because as I've gotten older, I was like, I hope I can get some gigs down in the Virgin Islands and get out of the cold weather for like a month or two.
Yeah.
And so that's worked out with the Hope program, HistoriCorps. I'm going to Puerto Rico.
Hmm.
And then with the National Park Service, I'm working with them on project in St. Croix. So it's like, oh, I hope these things turn out someday. And now it's like at my doorstep and I get to do it, which is fabulous.
Yeah, that's incredible. Here's another question I have for you, David, as we kind of thinking about the traveling that you're getting to do now in this season of your career. What are some of the projects that you're most excited about? I know you're saying you're training Park Service employees and getting to go down to St. Croix in Puerto Rico. Are there other
Hmm.
types of projects that you're also working on, perhaps locally or even around the mid Atlantic region that also have you
Well,
excited these days?
a funny story, the one that's funny is when I tell people, what I do, they always want to know, what have you worked on? And then they'll say, have you ever worked on the White House? And I'd go, no, I haven't. But I finally got to work on the White House
All
in
right.
August. And it was just now I can say it. and it was doing masonry work. It was repointing. We were working in the rose garden area. There's a walkway, but it was like, I loved it. It's a great memory for me, especially when I see on the news and I see presidents walk right over the same area that I just repointed. I mean, it's pretty exciting. So that was and I got to work at the Ford's Theater down in Washington. National Park Service hired me to train their employees how to do decorative plastering up in the ceiling. And I guess the other one is the Grant Memorial, which, worked a lot on the Grant Memorial repointing. And then let's see what else. Homewood. The Homewood House in Baltimore was a long-standing project for me. They hired over 20 years, redid a lot of the windows and the shutters and the front portico, rear portico. So, and another one, Tolson's Chapel, was always been a fun, piece of property for me. I got to do that from start to finish, and that's in Sharpsburg, and it was built by slaves after the Civil War. So now it's on the National Register. So it's a small little chapel, but it's great. So those are just a few, some of the projects that I've gotten to work on, and then hundreds and hundreds of residential homes.
Yeah. So I want to go back to that. 2025 is 50 years for you in the preservation space, and so I haven't had anyone on the show who's been in this space that long, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so while I want to certainly get to what's the next 50 years look like, I am curious from your perspective, David, how has this industry changed in the last half century? Are there new conversations that we're having, or are we still talking about the same things? What's your thought on the last 50 years?
Actually, I have a little bit of hope. One of the things, I belong to an organization called the Preservation Trades Network, which started 25 years ago. And so they have an annual conference every year. And it's been pretty much the good old boys that show up. And we all are saying we need people, young people, whatever, to get into the trades. And it's a hands-on thing. And now I can easily, when we open the show, I can say, hey, man, if you take this up, I guarantee you can be employed for 50 years and you can make a really good salary. And then sometimes I'll tell them, I make $100 an hour, just, I'm not being boastful, but I try to, preach the facts that it's out there. And it was the last IPTW, Preservation Trades Network conference we had in Frederick. There was a lot of young people, I was one of myself, and maybe a half a dozen other people were the only ones over 70 years old. Okay, the rest were like from 30 to 40. So that was really, we have hope. Let's put the preservation community. We need hands-on people. We need people to get involved in historic structures, but it has to be the hands-on people. So it was a joy to see the amount of new faces and the younger generation getting interested. And the other thing is we're seeing, like I also belong to window restoration organizations, and they just had a window summit down in Kentucky. Pine Mountain Settlement School. And half of the people that were there were women, and and everybody's thrilled about that. And that's the other thing I tell people, it's like the preservation field is open to everybody, women, men, not kids, but it's open to everyone. And I'm trying to push, we're going to start campaigning. One little thought that I have is to the art schools, because when I was in art school, I realized even then the chances of making a career, making money out of doing art is pretty limited. Mm-hmm. But yet, if I take a trades and a career, I knew that I would have an income, work and an income for the rest of our lives. And it's amazing how many people that are in the preservation world have an art background. And it's sort of like, well, I'm a sculptor, but I realize, I can take my same skills that I learned in the art school and become a decorative plasterer, Right. And so there's all of that. So that's what we're really trying to push.
I mean, you're right, David. I mean, skilled trades professionals are artisans, because you're
Right.
not coming in like there's no one size fits all to when you're working with these historic buildings. Half the time, if you put a level up, it's going to be a little off in the middle. So
That's right. Yeah.
you're creating something, right? You're working with
Yeah.
an existing structure and bringing your talent to make that, to restore that place to what the original artisan did, oftentimes 100 years ago. So it's like this
Yeah.
legacy, this continuum of beautiful artwork.
Yeah. I used to tell my employees, it's nice if something turns out to be level, but kind of set the level aside. What you have to do is you have to do whatever you're doing, walk 15, 20 feet back,
Mhm.
turn around and take a look at it.
Yep.
And it's going to read to you right away, like, and I need to fudge that a little bit this way or pull it out that way. And so much of it is like that,
Yeah.
that you have to have an eye and you have to have, make some judgment calls on certain things. And that's where I say, I mean, maybe AI will be able to do that 100 years from now, but I guarantee anyone who starts tomorrow, you'll have a career for the next 50 years and
Yep.
make good money. And they're in demand. I've
Yeah.
run into
Oh, yeah.
so many homeowners. It's like, please find me something. I will pay them anything. I will pay them anything. And
Yeah.
it's really true,
Yeah. It's really I'm gonna use the word a crisis at this moment, where we just don't have enough skilled artisans, trades professionals in the country to keep up with the amount of not only historic homes, but we also think about the museums and other historic sites
Hmm.
that state agencies run. Then you have
Hmm.
the National Park Service, and it's 425 odd units of the park. There's a
Yeah.
lot to do. So to your point, this field is wide open to anyone that wants to bring that skill
Yeah.
set and passion.
Yeah.
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 So so
So,
David, yeah, here's the question. This is my last question for you. So we talked about how the field has changed over the past 50 years. What do you think the next 50 years of this field looks like for us?
well, the same as it is now.
Yeah.
Historic buildings will continually need maintenance. And so it's always going to be there. And I've been to so many landmarks that you can see we're just kind of just touching, doing what we can, sort of doing it right, but we're sort of band-aiding it because there's so much more to do on most historic structures and buildings that we're just becomes a situation like we got to take care of this because the rain's coming in or the water's
Yep.
leaking in, that kind of thing. So I see the next 50 years. I'm trying to think. I mean, training's got to be the same. It has to be hands-on training. And the tools are all the same, yeah, I just see it. The next 50 years are going to be, as far as learning and training, the same as what's going on now.
Yeah, yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. The the ability, like you're just maintaining at this point, and it's very like,
Hmm.
there's so much work that it's oftentimes like just reactive, like just trying to keep up with let's just keep the rain out, or let's just make sure that
Yeah.
the doors are closing properly.
Hmm.
We often say in our space that if yeah, what a ounce of what's a preparing in advance will save you
Oh yeah.
a lot of more money. An ounce of
Yeah. Right.
is worth a pound of cure, right? Like
Yeah.
just
Right.
maintaining. But
Yeah.
the way that there's so much work and these skill sets are in so high demand that it's hard to find someone who can get out in front and help with the maintenance. It's just trying to
Yeah.
keep the building up at this point these days.
I think we just have to have that campaign of hitting the right market and just saying, we guarantee you, you will have work for the rest of your life and you can make a great hourly wage. What other profession can guarantee you that? Because sometimes I think, doctors, engineers, but so many things are just being replaced by robots. You see, like, oh, now, the robots are doing, heart surgery and this and that. And it's like their job to some extent isn't secure. Sooner or later, we're going to have an app on our phone that we're going to be able to do our own physical. And
Yeah.
you just rub it around your body. It's going to tell you if this is happening or that's happening. So, Yeah.
Yeah. So 50 years from now, we should be doubling down on more training, expanding
Yeah.
opportunities for people to come in this field because of the need.
Yeah, come in, and it's really that people need to know it's okay to do hands-on. It's good, okay to go to a trade school. I mean, I still hear when I was in Oklahoma, and that was the Hope Crew. I remember overhearing one of the volunteers talk about my parents are so disappointed in me that I'm not going to college. And I said, well, you come here. I said, you get over here. I said, you tell your parents this. And I really, he was really listening. I said, here's what you can. And that's when I say, you know what? I'm making $100 an hour doing this right now. And they always go, holy shit. It's like, I can't believe it. So those are the things we have to convey to people. And yeah, not to look down on it, but you're doing something that's fabulous. You're being an artist. Yeah, my final words is I tell people, when they ask me what do you do, I go always say I'm a restoration artist technician, and they go, what is that? If I said if I was a construction worker, then they just go the other way. So when you get to explain that, then they're really intrigued and they're drawn in. So we have to be able to have this sort of glamorous title, and we need that in order to get other young people interested. That what do you do? I'm a bricklayer. I'm a construction worker. No, you're a restoration artist technician, this kind of thing. Give it some pride.
Yeah, absolutely. And David, that's a really great point for us to end on, because as I'm thinking about this, is like, you know, being able to preserve these historic buildings, like having the ability to actually impact historic sites across the country. You're helping to preserve the nation's legacy. But
Hmm.
you've done it. If you do it long enough and you're really good at it, you also become a part of that legacy, right? Like, but not
Right.
for
Uh-huh.
David, your interventions over the past 50 years, there would be a lot of historic structures that would be impacted by your absence. And so, your work is certainly valuable. I appreciate you. I certainly call on you whenever I have questions. And so, thank you, David, for joining the
Well,
show today. This has been a great
that was
conversation.
great. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And so for all that are still with us, please tune in next week at 11 o'clock, same time Eastern. We will have Dr. Andrea Roberts join us for another episode of Three and the Possible. Y'all have a great week, and I'll see y'all later.
Okay.